What keeps you awake at night?
Sea levels are rising globally.
Fears fueled by horror stories.
Among the worst flu season in a decade, and it hasn't peaked yet.
We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous.
Another series of deadly terror attacks.
Because you know that thing your brain does in the middle of the night? This crazy thing where it takes a small problem and it just makes it enormous?
My friend, and you know, and I'm just gonna, for the sake of an anonymity, a friend of mine is part of a group online where they share the craziest porn they can find on Reddit and watch it as a group. Now, that being aside, I was shown a video of puppet porn. Now, what is that?
What is that, Olivia?
Exactly what you think it is. Think of like Avenue Q style puppets. And
like felt puppets?
Yeah. Yeah. With genitalia having active sex with human beings.
With humans. It's not just the puppets. It's puppets having sex with people.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of the all the things I thought it was, they were all wrong.
Yeah. And my favorite part too is there's like a scene in there where it's like a multi-clip like compilation, and the second scene is a threesome with a human man, a human woman, and a female puppet. And
so tell me, there's an arm in the bottom of the puppet, and they're just that arm is participating?
No, the arm does nothing. The puppet does everything.
I want to reach through my computer and smack you so hard. It's real. The puppet is real.
Uh-huh. The puppet is participating. I mean, they literally, like, they have felted penises. I don't know what to... Yeah, with condoms on it. I don't want to talk about it. And there's a scene where it's a guy who is flirting with the female puppet, and they're clearly having like an intimate moment, and she goes, "Are you ready?" And he goes,
"No.
I think I am." And then the other girl in the threesome goes, "Yeah, I'm in the scene too." And he gives her this face like, "Can you please fucking give us a moment?" And it's the best acting I've ever seen in a porn. And so the first suggested one, like, after that, because, like, I saw it and it was so jarring, the thumbnail was so jarring, I had to give it a second look. And it was a Lego porn, Leygo. So much.
I can't believe it took me this long to understand the title.
Lego.
Got it. Cause they're getting laid.
Hey. It's pretty creative.
Fucking
so at first I was like, this is fucking bizarre because they're painted yellow and they have outfits on. And then as I'm watching it, I'm realizing that there's like commentary about the Lego movie, and they're like, well, what are we gonna do? And they're like, well, I guess similar to the Lego film, we could turn it into a giant 90-minute advertisement. And I'm like, fuck, where am I? Like, what's
Jesus.
happening?
All this social commentary coming from a porn parody.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Like, mad props. And then
it was actually genuinely funny though. Like,
it's so funny. I might rewatch it just for the comedic value. The like actual sex part is very lame.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah,
but
it's
like
so weird.
But it's shocking to me that like a lot of parody porn is funny for the sake of how bad it is, and this has a little bit of that. But like the script itself is hysterically funny.
It's so wonderful. If I could pay them money somehow, I would. And so I don't know what your favorite part is, but my favorite part was the cum shot, which I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that they would have reenacted that by making him do like an orgasm face and then throwing individual tiny white Legos on her.
I mean, it is the finale for a reason. It is the best part of the entire thing.
And I'm just...
when they, like, walk out of the room and they have to step on the jizz Legos, and they're like, ow, ow, ow.
Oh,
My
Anyway.
favorite. I don't know why this made me laugh so hard, but when I watched it, there's a scene where he's got the penis of resistance. And he like looks down at this Lego block that is protruding from his blocky pants, and he's like, "What's that?" And then the girl is like, "You have the penis of resistance." And he's like, "I wonder what happens if I stroke it." And then it like the screen goes all wibbly for a second, and he stops and then goes, "Psychedelic."
Also, my favorite part, I said my favorite part isn't the nutting, but there's also this part where they're, like, having sex, and, like, it's just, like, the most boring vanilla
awful.
moans, and she goes, in the most monotone voice I've ever heard, "Are you close?" And he goes, "Not yet, dudette."
Dudette?
Yeah. So what a way to welcome our return to the podcast.
Welcome back, everyone.
As you may have noticed, we are just two women in a closet right now, separately.
Yeah,
have our
not
own
in the same
boyfriends.
closet, because that'd be gay.
That'd be super gay. So over the break, a lot had happened in forms of figuring out the logistics of moving forward. We wanted to come back and create a very professional setup and invest in higher tech and higher software. This to us is definitely moving forward going to be a very big core component of our lives. And I feel like when you start a podcast, it's very difficult to understand how difficult it's going to be.
We had no idea that this was going to be as difficult as it is. It's work.
Yeah, I definitely thought there would be some work involved with the research and the editing, but, like, obviously as you get, more out there and you get more downloads, you have to worry about social media and contacting and coordinating and guesting and buying very expensive equipment.
Yeah.
So, had a formal discussion, all of us, and it was essentially resolved that Bree is not currently a place that would be conducive to her being able to be, like, a long-term host in the way that we are planning on going forward with the podcast. So we love her, and we're going to miss her very dearly and her comedic timing. But it is what it is.
Yeah, it's a huge bummer, and we're just really bummed out that it couldn't work out. So if you guys want to, like, go to her personal Instagram or Twitter and just shoot her a tweet or a DM, just show her some love. We're all pretty bummed out about it, and I'm sure she would appreciate how much you guys enjoyed her being here. That would be very nice of you.
Yes.
But yeah, the plan is definitely to move forward, and we want to, just pick up where we left off, make something that you guys continue to enjoy. So I think the first series is going to be very much experimental in finding the way that the rhythm works with just two hosts. Yes. We're thinking that we're going to be wanting more guest stars, and that will probably take the place of the third host. So yeah, just, be very communicative with how you feel about where the show's going. If you feel like something else would work better, we are all ears, because this is going to be a learning experience for everyone.
Woo!
Yeah. But there is good news. We did have some very very exciting first things happen over the break. We actually got our first piece of fan mail, which was very exciting. I sent it to everyone I know. And I was just so excited. Daria sent us an email telling us that they love our podcast to the point where they've listened to some of the episodes multiple times, and I really want to know which one they are.
My heart's so warm.
It's amazing. And they said that they really enjoyed the CIA cover-up series, and then recommended a bunch of different topics for heavy hitters in the future. So,
which will be secret, because it's top secret under wraps.
But just know,
podcasting.
Daria, just know if you're listening that they have gone into our vault, and we will definitely be including them in the roster in the future, because these are bangers, my dude.
Yeah, they had really, really great recommendations, and I'm not gonna lie, anytime any of you ever tweet, DM, or email us I guarantee you we've screenshotted it and sent it to each other and gone, oh my god, 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 oh my god.
It
This
made
is
my
crazy.
entire day. I just hope you guys know. I know when I reach out to people that I'm a fan of, I get like really self-conscious and I'm like, oh god, what if I'm bothering them?
Yeah.
If I am any example of what it feels like, you are making everyone's day when you just say a nice thing. It is so cool. It's the coolest thing ever. And we got 2 new patrons on Patreon. Cassidy, you're not alone in the Patreon corner anymore. Also, thank you, Cassidy, for raising your pledge. That was the coolest shit ever.
Yeah,
but we
love you,
we
love
have
you.
Alice and Karina both in our family now. So thank you so
We are
much.
collecting an army.
We
and
are, yeah.
we
We're almost at
will-
500 Twitter followers, so I think that's enough to take over a small country at this point.
I mean, if you have the strength and willpower of the U.S. government, I'm sure anything's possible. So,
Really, we're just gonna jump right into that, huh?
on that note,
So welcome, welcome, welcome to modern slavery. Woo!
as woo as you can be, am I right, ladies?
Yeah, it was kind of lackluster, wasn't it?
So, getting right into it, I'm Olivia.
I am Brooke.
We're gonna at some point remember to do that, like in the beginning.
Yeah, maybe. It's
I'm gonna be
tradition
honest
now.
with you. I'm not gonna commit to anything. And
That's
today
the
we're
key.
talking
Don't set
about-
expectations, and then you won't disappoint anyone.
That's what I'm saying. So don't expect us to ever introduce ourselves, is what I'm saying. So today we're talking about modern slavery.
Yay!
Now, if you're a regular listener, you would know this already. But if you're a new listener, let me clue you in. Whenever we have a topic, the other person does not know about it. So it's a fun, sad surprise. This one, Brooke knew, like, immediately.
I mean,
The
of
one-
course.
Yeah, because I talk about this all the time.
I think you've recruited pretty much everyone who even tangentially knows you to
Yes.
just think about it whenever they purchase anything.
And purchase, you must ask? Today, we're talking about modern sweatshops. It's sad. And so when I was writing it, the reason I became so interested in this is because I had taken a course in the history of neoliberalism, which I will define momentarily. And one of the most interesting things about that class, the professor, Dr. Robert Kelly, is one of the most brilliant men I've had the good fortune to come into contact with, and even luckier take a class with. He definitely had strong opinions towards, equality and wealth distribution and stuff like that. But he was very level-headed in the sense of, like, you can't fully understand the ills of the world and the effects of neoliberalism if you think in a black and white. What's the word I'm thinking of?
Like a black and white dynamic, or
There we go.
or-
Thank you. It's 11:30, so I have no excuse. And, like, it's in my notes everywhere. Like, he'll make notes. He's like, you can't surmise this period of history with Keynesian versus Hayek. You can't surmise this with Republican versus Democrat. Like, it's too simplistic. It doesn't include everything.
Right.
So I think because I had the opportunity to take this class and get plenty of background on the ills of capitalism and neoliberalism and market regulation, I have an explanation on sweatshops that spans back to 1850. As is...
Jesus Christ, Olivia!
This is why I was awake until 2 a.m. It just needed to be all there.
Yeah, you can't cut it short. I get it.
And it's just, ladies and gents and everybody in between, this is... Let's open it.
I'm not excited.
All right, let's start at April 24th, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Reba Skitter is an 18-year-old survivor of the Rana Plaza building collapse. Have you ever heard of this?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so in April 24th, 2013, there was a collapse of a garment worker building in Bangladesh.
Jesus.
And just to kind of give a summary of the magnitude of that event, Reba Skeeter is talking at a Senate hearing in 2014 because as a response to the heinous experience experienced by these workers, it's like they had a whole Senate hearing and they had to figure out what they were going to do legislative wise as far as regulating these companies because oh my god. And I'm going to use an excerpt from the book We Are All Fast Food Workers Now because I think
that is
the
quite
author.
The title.
Yep. Fully recommend that book. It's essentially about how we've all been indebted into modern slavery by proxy, and it's sad. So I'm just going to read an excerpt, and then we're going to get right into the history. In 2013, she had worked 14-hour days for $49 a month. She couldn't afford to miss work, even for a day, she said, though she had noticed cracks spreading throughout the walls of the Savar building, and she knew that older workers were worried. When Skeeter arrived for work on April 24th, 2013, she saw her colleagues milling about, hesitant to enter. One worker pointed to the rubble by the doors. The building foundation appeared to be dissolving. Then Skeeter heard the boss yell, quote, "You bloody people, if you don't go inside, you won't get your salary." Workers nervously filled in. Sitting in her sewing machine, Skeeter could feel the building shake, but the bosses wouldn't let anyone leave. When the walls collapsed around her, Skeeter was hit by breeze and knocked unconscious.
Jesus.
Skeeter was hit by debris and knocked unconscious. She woke to the sound of crying, but she could not see anything. She lay trapped under the rubble for 3 days, scratching a tiny opening through which she called for help. Then, rescuers, hands on her, inching her towards the light. "I saw many injured and dead workers," she says. Many surgeries later, she still suffers from daily pain. Her bones never healed properly, nor has her heart or her mind, and she knows she's lucky. So
with that, everyone, are we ready to have fun?
So let's find out how the fuck that happened. It all started in 1830. So in about 1830s to 1850s, there was a system of subcontracting work that began England, and it was described as the sweating system. So essentially what would happen if you have a garment company that's looking for things to be made, they would not hire workers directly. They would hire people called sweaters who would then hire people to sew the garments, and these workplaces were notoriously heinous. Very enclosed small spaces, insane hours, abysmally low pay. If you're very familiar with just a lot of like literature, they talk about these, a lot. These are the typical sweatshops.
Sure, yeah. The thing that you think of when you hear sweatshops.
Sweatshops, this image. So skipping ahead, this was pretty common practice, and generally speaking, nobody really cared. If you recall in your years of AP US history or just reading books, which I'm unfamiliar with.
I'm sorry, a book? What is...
I have no time.
Book?
You understand, someone who reads books for your degree.
Yeah, the English major who specializes in not doing the reading. That's me. I pay thousands of dollars a year to not do my reading.
Don't we just? Isn't that just the way?
Ain't that just the way?
So this is also the kind of system, if you think of the muckrackers doing exposés on just the heinous working conditions in the U.S., if you think of the Book of the Jungle,
yes,
you have the meat sweatshops. You have his family members that were working in other sweatshops. Just
bad
disgusting.
Time. Straight up not having a good time.
Straight up, and they were horrible. And the only reason that any change was done, if you recall, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire.
Yes, I do know that one.
So March 25th, 1911. There was a fire in a building where there was a sweatshop. It was the floors 8 through 10, which is important. And there was a small fire that had began. I forget how it started or where it started in the building, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say buildings weren't constructed to not burn easily. So
Yeah,
very
I mean,
quickly.
the easy way to avoid it is to just not start a fire, right?
I would say, I think that's how all fires should not be started. So
you don't start a fire by not starting the fire. How hard is it, guys? Like,
make that a shirt. We'll put it on our merch.
God.
We'll sell it. Oh, that's entirely insensitive. So,
Jesus.
So when the fire began, you know, the rest of the building exited in an orderly manner and exited outside to safety. But it was very common practice at the time for the factory owners to lock in the workers. This prevented them from taking regular breaks and prevented them from stealing, I don't know, material, I guess was the
Yeah,
was the
I
theory.
think the concern was that they didn't want the workers taking fabric home because that was costly to the company.
Forbid. And so when the fire started, they couldn't leave. And the reason I say 8th to 10th floors, if you can just conceptually think about how high up off the ground that was, in a panic, a lot of people jumped out the windows to their death. Just, you know.
There's no surviving that fall.
No.
And even if you did, you wouldn't want to.
Yeah. In total, 146 people died. The youngest being 14 and the oldest being 43 years old. They were mostly comprised of Jewish and Italian immigrants, so I'm actually very surprised at the time that people even cared, just considering the racism in the U.S.
It was just so public. People were watching it from the street.
Yeah, regardless of your feelings, I guess, towards immigrants, it was very bad.
Yeah.
And I think this is the most deadly accident that they had in a factory in U.S. history. I forget the specific phrasing. It's like it is notoriously famous for being deadly and horrible. And as a result, there was legislation passed and protective organizations initiated to protect those workers. You know, the unions were very crucial in collective bargaining and ensuring people had reasonable wages and were not working in horrible living conditions.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to skip ahead because this skips from a background of what sweatshops are like to how the modern sweatshops began in the global south, which is inclusive of South America, Africa, and I'd say a large majority of the Asian continent.
Okay.
It's just the general name for if you include all of the third world or developing countries, it's the global south. So in 1954, there was an agreement made with the Bretton Woods system, and that essentially it was going to be a globally established system for monetary purposes. There's so much, and I'm going to say straight up and apologize. I am fully aware that there's more econ that we just hear me out on this. People interested in economics, you know that I can't go through in 90 minutes tops.
Who has the time?
I'm interested. Hear me out, but I don't have the time.
It's an hour show, guys.
Only so much we can do. So this Bretton Woods agreement, the Bretton Woods system, established the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, to monitor currency and exchange rates. The World Bank, which is responsible for the reconstruction of Europe post-World War II, and U.S. dollars became the international currency. As a result, we were kind of a large head in the Bretton Woods system, much to the dislike of many neoliberalists in the U.S. And neoliberals, which I will continue to explain, did not like this Bretton Woods system because it included economic planning, tariffs, and international trade organization agreements.
God forbid.
It was built primarily on the policies of Keynesian policies, right?
Okay.
The idea that by investing a large amount of money into public organizations, public systems and stuff like that, it was going to be the most effective way of increasing capital wealth and, uniting the world, and very complicated stuff.
Sure, yeah.
Key takeaway here, and this is so crucial because I know that there's kind of this idea that we need to be more tough abroad and in letting people get punished for what they do economically. banks failing and shit like that, which is what we're going to get into because it's going to get very important. The fact that the US dollar became the international currency essentially put the US in this position where we are required to be the global police, because if our currency fails, if our currency dips, everyone gets wildly fucked over. Put a pin in that, because that's going to be very important when we get to the 80s.
It's a helpful tool that we'll come back to later.
Leave that in your noggin. So neoliberalism in a nutshell, I thought that the best way to describe it is going to be through Milton Friedman. He's a very famous and renowned neoliberal. This is from his writing Neoliberalism and Its Prospects. He wrote it in 1951 for just historical contexts.
Cool.
Neoliberalism would accept the 19th century liberal emphasis on the fundamental importance of the individual, but it would seek to use competition among producers to protect consumers from exploitation, competition among employers to protect workers and owners of property, and competition amongst consumers to protect the enterprises themselves. The citizens would be protected against the state by the existence of a free market. So this is really important, because historically, two key things here. One, the large majority of, I think, like, fundamental neoliberalist thinkers had their opinions as a result of firsthand experiences with the Great Depression.
Sure, yeah.
Which was the result, to a degree, of poor money management, government intervention, government corruption. Milton Friedman in particular, he was the son of two immigrants, and he actually was going to major in mathematics but switched to economics solely because he wanted to find some kind of economic policy that would prevent the Great Depression from happening ever again. It's similar with Hayek. Hayek lived in Germany during their giant inflation issue, which is the result of just like printing money and over government control. And then the most important part of that quote that I want to say is, at the time, the core concern of a lot of economic philosophers is that the state was actively doing things that was harming people and harming the poor.
Right.
Because at the time, I would say it's a fair argument. I think the shortcoming in the neoliberalist policy is that I think it would have been very effective if there was a clear separation between government and private enterprise.
Right.
And at the time when they were making these arguments, there was. So they're saying, private enterprise, competitively speaking, should find a way to compete for the best working conditions, and government intervening is inherently susceptible to corruption and politicians doing things to meet their own,
right, yes,
own ideas, and
their own agendas and stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think the issue is that as time progressed and those two worlds became so closely intertwined, I think the policies kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
So that's all my caveat to this, because I think in hindsight it's very easy to see that, like, the free market is going to fuck everything up, simplistically putting it.
At the time.
But at the time, I understand where they were coming from, and I think a large majority, besides Ropke, who is outwardly racist, they were trying to find a way to protect the poor and protect people from government corruption. If you think of all of the government corruption at the time.
And that's like an honorable goal. Like,
yeah,
the idea was not to fuck everything up.
Yes.
And yet.
So, important. And going back to the Keynesian economics thing, the Bretton Woods Agreement, the reason why they didn't like tariffs is because the idea was, if you put tariffs up, it will prevent free trade from occurring. And the economic theory was, if you include everybody in the free market, everyone globally, it's going to allow poorer countries to become exporters and import things that will reduce the amount of time they have to allocate to producing those commodities, thus increasing their GDP and allowing them to improve infrastructure and internal spending.
Okay.
No planning, which means, like, government planning is essentially like high taxes and managing certain aspects of production and infrastructure and development. Their argument was, at the time, this is going to be an inherently corrupt process, and there's a lot of examples of times where planning has been really helpful. So I think the example they gave is Japan. Japan had a highly rigid planning structure that worked out well until their massive economic crash. Right. Or even if you look at like Korea, North Korea had great leaps in production because one person was making all of the decisions.
Yikes.
At a cost, but you can even see their, exactly what they were talking about, right?
Right.
And then they didn't like the International Trade Organization because it regulates trade, and if you have some kind of organization that's kind of making the calls on limiting trade, they think that inherently it's going to get corrupt and it's going to affect everybody's ability to compete equally. Very interesting. I found this class very interesting.
Right.
So then we progress forward to the 1960s, because I don't have time to fully unpack neoliberalism, which will be another episode in its entirety.
Yeah.
So in the Cold War, the U.S. began largely funding the war on poverty. So essentially, there was this fundamental disconnect where they made the argument that in communist countries, people were doing poorly and they were sick and not getting assistance and starving to death, which was not lining up with the fact that we had a pretty high, rate of poverty in the U.S. So
sure,
in like a Keynesian system, they rapidly funded government assistance programs and welfare, and I will give credit to them. After their initiation of the war on poverty in the Cold War era, by 1969, the programs had successfully reduced the number of the poor from 38 million to 24 million.
Which is like a pretty good leap.
Yeah, and, caveat is obviously there's some racism here. It's the 60s. What do you
Just
fucking
a little
expect?
bit.
It's a 43% reduction in the white poor compared to the 24% reduction in the black poor.
God, that's such an insane stat.
Isn't that? It's like literally almost like half.
Yeah.
That's again
not
another
an
day. But I'll give it to them. Good progress, right?
Sure.
And it helped a lot of people out of poverty. During this time period, there was an increase in collective bargaining. Pay was going up for a lot of people. So
like good, but with an asterisk.
Good with an asterisk, and this could be a whole fucking day because this is the most interesting thing I read about in my class. A lot of people think that the recession that we're about to talk about happened like randomly, like just out of the blue, but this recession was kind of planned in the books from the Bretton Woods Agreement. Like it had been gradually accumulating contributing factors that all peaked in about 1971.
When you say planned, do you mean like purposefully or
No. It's
okay.
I'm gonna say what's fair, and this is what my teacher said. Nobody had any fucking idea how to run a global economy. This was a brand new concept. So 2020 hindsight, you can look back on the deregulation of the banks, passing of certain acts, and say clearly this was not going to work well, but at the time, the U.S. government had become an international icon, and their economy had to remain great at all times, or everyone's economy was going to tank.
Sure, yeah.
And so there were some choices made that I think people were just trying to figure out how to do this.
Right. No pressure.
No pressure. And I know there's a lot of people, I know I'm distilling it, but please cut me a fucking break. And so in 1973 to 1975, there was a massive recession in the U.S., and this was the period of stagflation. Have you heard of that? Kind of remember?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is counterintuitive to economic, just theory.
Right,
because essentially inflation is at an increase, which should be the results of economic development and improvement to account for that. But the economy was at a complete standstill, and inflation was increasing.
Yeah.
Super dangerous, meaning those who had money, it was gradually losing power with no ability to get more money.
Right.
So during this period, and I think a large portion of this is the result of the Nixon administration initiating some wage controls, essentially capping how much that you should be paying people for certain things and hour caps and everything like that. And also in 1971, we exited the Bretton Woods Agreement, which was the massive connector that regulated the world currency, also ours.
Right.
Another big thing is they allowed a large amount of credit to be taken out by private institutions. So capital invested by non-financial institutions rose to a historically high rate of 4.3 between 1967 and 73, which during 1949 to 1966, nearly 20 years, the average was 3.1%.
Oh.
So very high. And then just application-wise, it's the equivalent sort of printing money. You're giving people money that doesn't exist.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So all those issues combined resulted in an inflation of the value of the dollar, and reduced the amount of money held by the working class in a large majority of the U.S. because they had the wage caps. And then globally, this initiated a global recession. This was a global economic crisis during this time period. The U.S. had a very volatile exchange rate because our currency was kind of all over the place. This was the result of inflation, and then we would apply controls. And I will concede that a big reason for this as well is that our money at the time was not fiat. It was linked to gold, so people would be selling U.S. dollars for gold because it was worth more.
Yeah.
Just this giant loop of our money was not being planned well.
Oh my god, yeah.
So the government reduced taxes to increase citizens' money supply, right? Because they're doing their goddamn best.
Mm-hmm.
But as a result, we were getting fewer tax dollars in, and one of the first things to go was social assistance.
Of course.
Which, if we just talked about, had one of the largest increases in funding after World War II.
Right.
So essentially these social assistance programs that were raising people up from poverty just kind of got cut, and as a result, we'll talk about this, there was a large increase in unemployment and poverty increased. Just contextually, employers had to start laying off employees to compensate for decreased profits, because not only is there inflation, but also on a global scale, since we were global exporters, people are buying less because this whole recession is affecting multiple countries.
Right.
So countries are buying from us It's a mess.
So
it's
it was
very
just this
bad.
cyclical garbage that
Yes.
no one could get out of.
Yeah, there's like it's just like once it happened, it was too fucking late. This is when the price of oil was raised 400%.
Woo!
It was bad. This whole period was bad.
Yes.
And so to compensate for the fact that nobody had any money and union workers were still petitioning for higher pay, which I can appreciate, but if
the money just wasn't there.
The money wasn't there, so if you're petitioning for higher pay, they're going to have to fire people.
Right.
Because they don't have the money to pay that. And, I say, yes, there are global, industries or companies that are, like, multinational that mayhaps could afford it because their CEOs are getting, like, $1 kajillion a year. But this was also affecting smaller scale employees like, small manufacturing firms, like in the middle of St. Louis or Detroit, right?
Right.
Who had maybe
it's
a
not
couple
all
hundred.
Amazon.
Right? Like, so it's just, I can't articulate how bad this was. And so because they're laying off their employees from 1973 to 1980, there are about 4 million U.S. jobs lost overseas because these companies would seek labor where it was far more affordable, creating products that are thus more affordable for the people who are already poor to be able to afford. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So a
Sounds
big cycle. People
Right.
are losing their jobs, or they're working jobs where they make no money. So they have to export the jobs to make products affordable so that people can buy things with the money they already don't have.
Right. But to export the jobs means to pay the people outside of the U.S.
Right.
very, very, very little.
And also less jobs here. So
Right.
I mean, like,
It just
everything
keeps
is
going.
bad.
Yeah.
And so in the 1970s as a whole, we lost 32 million jobs to a combination of exporting labor, scaling back the amount of workers that we have, and then, of course, the less appreciated factor of the rapid increase in technology is going to require less people to work.
Right. It's all automated.
There was a book that I read, and it's called The Making of Global Capitalism, and it's a harsh sentence to parse, but workers were considered a barrier to capital efficiency because they would be petitioning for higher pay, which was just not sustainable at the time, and if they didn't receive it, then they would picket, which would mean that they're not producing goods, which means the company's not making money. Bad cycle. I don't think anyone was winning in this scenario, especially not the workers, and I'm not saying they should have worked for garbage pay. I think it was just a bad situation. Like, it was just...
Yeah, I gotta say, the wording of workers being a barrier, like, I understand, but also there's nothing more just cartoonishly evil than that sentence.
A barrier to capital efficiency.
Like, fuck off, whoever wrote that. You could have said it any other way.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. This whole book is very
that way.
Very concise. A quote from there, and this was at the end of a paragraph, they said that the most important thing to take from this section is that worker resistance was a significant factor in preventing the restoration of both higher profit rates and higher profit share of national income. So, worker resistance and their competitive, like, their bargaining, all very necessary,
right,
but also not helpful to not only the companies but also to themselves.
Right, so there's no winning.
There is no winning. This whole decade was ass. So thankfully it gets better, right?
No.
I could do a whole episode on the Volcker shock. Have you ever heard of it?
You've mentioned it, but I don't have a good working definition.
Okay, so in 1979, Paul Volcker becomes the chairman of the Federal Reserve. He was famously very neoliberal, and I've watched many an economic documentary because my boyfriend loves economics, and because I'm a good girlfriend, I love and support his interests. And it seems, conservatively speaking, that a large majority of economists agree with what he did because of the position that they were in. He did things that fucked literally everyone on the face of the earth over. But his argument is we've gotten ourselves into a position where people don't trust the US dollar, which is the basis of international currency. We're in an insane amount of debt. The national debt was rising rapidly. Inflation
and continues to.
Inflation is through the fucking, like, was completely uncontrollable.
Right.
And so his argument was the only way to get back to a sustainable, reliable economy is a period of bad. And this comes from, I can talk about how this still applies to today, and there's a predicted depression coming up soon because cyclically we haven't allowed this to happen in a long time. But, essentially, he raised interest rates to 10 to 20%.
Woof.
Interest rates are usually, I'd say, like 5 to 8 tops.
Yep.
Maybe even less. Sometimes like 2.
Okay.
So the economic theory here is if the interest rates are so high on loans, it reduces personal spending and encourages investment, which is just fact.
Okay.
The unemployment rate rose from, it was about, I think, 3 to 4. It was hovering 3 or 4 even during that recession.
Right.
And it rose to 11%, which is insanely high.
Yes.
It brought, as a result, and to summarize this whole decade, it did bring great financial stability to the world. After this period was over, personal savings had vastly increased. There were private companies that released credit so that, people had more consumer power. There was trust in the US dollar again. Controversial but effective at what cost? And the cost is it destroyed sustainable, self-sufficient agriculture. It favored wealthy farmers that were able to afford very expensive commodities. They grew, obviously, like surplus corn and everything to make a profit. It resulted in displacement, urban migration, and unemployment. This was a period where, as a result of these things, people began moving from farmland to big cities.
Right.
And many governments abroad defaulted on their loans because this had a global effect.
Right, right.
And so they defaulted on their loans, and as a result, debt in the third world, a decade after 1973, quintupled.
Oh. Okay.
So what does that mean for the third world?
Well,
for the
I'm
global
so
South?
glad you asked.
It disenfranchised them. The IMF and the World Bank would have this policy where they would purchase debt from defaulting and indebted countries and would forgive these debts on the contingent that they would make it easier and cheaper for foreign countries to do business there. Theoretically, their argument here is thus: if you include yourself in the global economy, you're able to import goods that perhaps your country is less able to produce. Like if you're somewhere that has less arable land, you can import food, and then you can specialize your labor to something more effective. Increase your GDP, thus increasing your purchasing power, which you can use to fund infrastructure and improvement, and then raise themselves into the modern world.
Okay.
And when they say developing nations, that comes from the fact that you have these countries that were essentially stuck in just decades, if not hundreds of years earlier in development than the rest of the modern world. So they're developing because they're essentially mirroring the economic development that we experienced from the 1800s to that point.
Okay.
Right? Problems.
Yeah. All issues.
This is such a dense episode, but I swear to God it's gonna get sadder.
There's a payoff.
So the problem here is, and I can appreciate the theory, and I can appreciate that there are people there whose sole intention is they want to do economic policies that will allow these developing nations to compete globally and use the money, which, let's be honest here, let's concede, money is power and money is used to improve lives. We live in that world. You know, sucks to suck.
Yeah.
However, the U.S. is one of I think it is the world's largest major exporter. Up there with China, and Germany's a close third. And so as a result, these agreements that these countries would make, they would say, yes, we will make it easier for people to import. People, I mean, like UK and Germany and the US. Yeah. The U.S. has access to some of the most fertile land in the world, and wealth unimaginable to poor farmers. So, for example, the interest rates on farming equipment for farmers in Jamaica, in a documentary I saw, whose name escapes me, it can be as high as about 23%. So, logistically, getting farming equipment is very difficult, and then they get the farming equipment, and it's redundant in like a few years.
Right.
They can't afford the new equipment. And then, competitively speaking, the U.S. subsidizes their own dairy prices 176%.
Oh, my God.
So, if you're importing dairy, like, how can you compete with a global superpower?
You literally can't.
Like, in the most efficient way humanly possible.
Yeah,
right?
You can't. It's impossible.
It's impossible. So this was one of the reasons that there was a big move from countries to the city. Because people can't work as sustaining farmers anymore if you have to compete with that.
Oh my God.
And even that had some problems to it. So currently, I'd say a large majority of these countries lack the ability to form massive corporations that can compete globally with these multinational companies, right?
Yeah, go figure.
You're not going to start a small, like, indie development in Indonesia and be able to compete with Apple.
Yeah, let me just make the new Pepsi really quick.
Right? So, and as a result, some of these agreements is, they'd be lowering the import fees so that any homegrown products, any products made within the country were not going to be purchased because, like I said, it's this cyclical poverty thing where people become more poor and then as a result are forced to buy these cheaper products.
Right.
Which make them more poor.
Right.
A cycle of poverty. And so any attempt to make the deals with the IMF it's in vain because the IMF counts votes based on essentially your economic position, how much influence you have over the global economy.
Oh my god.
There are 189 countries in the IMF, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the US controls 17.5% of the vote.
Holy shit.
Because we are the global superpower. We have so much fucking money, right? So like, what's the point in even trying to ask for foreign aid or some leniency if the US is gonna go, I'm sorry, does that affect me? No, I'm not.
Oh my god.
Right?
This is insane.
So the only competitive means of making money is to export labor. That's all they fucking have.
Yeah,
right?
We got people. That's it.
Yeah, and governments are incentivized to do so because, think of a country like Indonesia or somewhere in China. China alone. You need money. You need money to improve infrastructure. You need taxes. You need something to allow yourself to create facilities, to allow housing, to support your people, to bring yourself into the modern age. People want money. You have to make whatever concessions you need to make in order to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And so, there's this reward system if you offer these multinational companies that are largely centered, I'd say, either in Europe or the US, incentivizes, tax breaks. You offer them workers that have no ability to form unions. You're going to make money, which you're going to return back into the development of your country in an ideal world. And we don't even have the time to talk about the mass corruption in these.
That'll be a whole other episode series. It's going to just be corruption, corporate corruption.
Corporate corruption, talking about how literally, there are union organizers in these developing nations that are being assassinated for their work.
Oh my god.
So, all of that...
That's another story.
culminates at 54 minutes. I'm finally going to get into my topic.
Oh no. It's just like when we first started, this is going to be a 2-hour episode.
No, we're good. We're on page 5 of 8.
Oh!
So, garment manufacturing.
Right.
Brooke is going to have her own episode, and then we're having a guest. There are many, 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 many means that these countries are turning to slave labor, whether it's, I have the list here if you would like to feel bad.
What's the name of our show again? Is it
Things That Keep Me Up at Night?
Oh, that's right. It's not Things That Make Me Feel Good and Perfect and, nice about the world. That's not our title.
No. So there's been a lot of studies done on the Global Slavery Index. My one little side note I'm going to say here, difficult to gather and validate information on this due to the extent and the scale of modern slavery, and I will talk about some of the reasons that it's hard to find that out. Collectively, G20 countries are importing about $354 billion worth of at-risk products annually. This is from research done by the Global Slavery Index.
Oh my god.
And these at-risk products are cotton, brick, garments, cattle, sugarcane, gold, carpet, coal, fish, rice, timber, Brazil nuts, cocoa, diamonds, and electronics.
God, there's so
Plenty
many.
of options for you, Brooke, if you're interested in those.
Oh my god, there's so many.
That's so many. The U.S. alone is the purchaser of about $144 billion in at-risk products.
Oh my god.
And as a fun fact, garments are the most widely traded and valuable product of these categories that I listed, and it's in the top 5 list of products that every one of the G20 countries imports. G20 is like, I'm not going to go into the 20, but it's the list of the most affluent countries in the world.
Okay.
So as I said, these countries are kind of incentivized to use slave labor. In Bangladesh alone, about 70 to 90% of the exports are from the garment industry. Okay?
God.
So that's their whole fucking economy.
Yeah.
And it's about 85% in Cambodia, which I'll focus on a little bit more. And so when 90% of your economy is one thing, you're kind of in a place where you want to protect that.
It does sort of put you in a bind, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say a little bit. And so this all kind of began, as I said, it began truly when there were labor rights activists petitioning for more money, and as a result, the multinational companies seeked, labor elsewhere. In 1974, the multi-fiber agreement was passed, and this was to protect the garment industry in the U.S. It essentially limited the amount of clothing that one foreign country could produce and import to the U.S., right? So if you limit that, you're requiring producers to produce clothing in the U.S. And I understand the intention, but as Hassan read over my shoulder, that was really smart, because what they did instead was produce their products in multiple countries to compensate for the fact they wouldn't center themselves entirely in Bangladesh. They'd be like, all right, let's do the shirts in Bangladesh, let's do the pants in Taiwan, let's do everything else, like let's say Indonesia, because one, you don't have to really adhere to the multi-fiber agreement, and then a huge result of this is it was a super fragmented garment industry, so very difficult to track where everything's coming from.
God, which is so... the cascading effects of everything that causes everything else.
Sobering.
Just
like that's why this one was so complicated, because to just whittle it down to we just want to make more money, that's not even close to what it is. There's so much.
Like, corporate greed is a thing, and sure, but this is so much more than corporate greed. Yeah. It was just a combination of so many things, and then also a little side dish of corporate greed,
Isn't it strange though? And I will say, as a brief aside, it's I was going into this research kind of anticipating that I would just be furious at, corporations for deliberately fucking over the poor, if you will. And it seems to me it's just more muddled than I initially thought it would be, even though I did learn about this in class.
Yeah, it really does just feel like everybody's scrambling to try and not die.
Yes.
And that is so sad. Like, just...
Yeah.
Everybody is out for themselves, but not because they're greedy, but because everything has been crashing down around them for 30 years.
Yes, 100%.
I'm crying.
And I don't even have the time to go into instances where there would be countries that would be very protective over their economy, and they would put these high tariffs up and say, no, we don't want the imports to damage our own industries. And then literally the country next to them was not putting up tariffs, and they were rapidly advancing and improving their infrastructure because they were getting money. So it's
God.
At what cost? At what cost are you protecting your people if by protecting your people you're hurting them because you can't afford to help them,
What happens if you take away, garment workers? There's nothing left. No one has any money or any job then, and they all die. So
So
now what? Oh God.
And one of the big things, like I said, do you remember I said that in order for them to buy the debt, they would have to agree to certain terms and conditions to have that debt forgiven by the World Bank.
Yeah.
So one of the ones, and this is a major incentivizer in these countries, and as early as the 1960s, originating in India, countries would set up these free trade zones, FTZs. They're also known as export zones, export-free zones, yada, yada, yada. It's all the same thing. And essentially what you have is this area of land kind of close to shipping areas that you can either finish up manufacturing products or ship products, something of the sort that would be... It would encourage global companies to settle in their country because they would give them tax breaks, they would give them the land and so you don't have to pay taxes on the land. These are workers that are pliable, and it's illegal to unionize in this area, in this tax-free zone.
God.
And so you create this literally this little slavery pocket of we'll promise you slaves as long as you give us money.
Slavery pocket?
I mean, am I wrong?
Oh, God, it's just so yucky.
Yeah, it really is. And the regulations there were suspended. Like, the regulations that they had in their country did not necessarily have to extend to these FTZs.
Oh, God.
Right? And it's advertised, and I quote, as a congenial investment climate free from cumbersome procedures.
Nah.
And then the threat there is if the government puts any regulation on workers or raises the minimum wage or anything, it is very, very easy for these multinational companies to go, oh, okay, well, I'm just taking my labor and putting it somewhere else to somebody who can provide that for me.
Oh, my God.
And so the standards of living for these workers, I don't in any way want to minimize how horrible this is, because I know that I've been kind of on the fence of having this money improves your country through infrastructure.
Right.
Yes, but no. You know?
Also, it's still bad.
Also, it sucks. So one of the conditions of the debt forgiveness that the IMF and the World Bank would put in their contract is that the countries needed to privatize their resources. The IMF is just like, IMF and World Bank is just a neoliberal center point. So yes, by privatizing their business, you're creating jobs for people to get paid, but by privatizing your business, it's equally as open to corruption. I mean, it happens in the U.S. It's going to happen there.
No. What are you talking about?
I'm gonna fucking fight you. I'm gonna drive to your house. I'm gonna fight you right now. The water and the gas companies, food, privatizing resources has generally not had a great result. Have we seen Argentina?
Go figure.
And so that alone is affecting the quality of the resources, right? Because if you have these private industries fundamentally invested on productivity and not quality of life, the water usage and the environmental impact of fast fashion is insane, and it makes it the second dirtiest industry on earth.
Oh my God.
Only second to oil, because of the amount of water it takes to produce the cotton and the fibers and then the fabric, and then think of the oil to make these plastics and all of the labor and
it makes sense. It's just disturbing.
Yeah, it's horrible. That fact made me go, are you fucking kidding me? I was like, come on, can somebody cut me a goddamn break?
I love when you can't keep it in anymore and you just start saying shit out loud.
I would read things and I was next to Hassan and I went, come on.
Choking my ass.
Give me a break,
Yeah, you think it would just get a little bit better ever?
I don't know why I keep doing that. We're 23 episodes in at this point.
You'd think we'd fucking learn.
I just have hope. I think I came back from the break like positive, and I've been reading uplifting books and meditating, and I'm like, this can't be as bad as it is, and then it is. So here we are. Why am I like this? So in an interview, they talk about the insanity in how much they're expected to do. I mentioned briefly there's the girl who talked about working 14-hour days. So in Cambodia, you'd work on a team, and your team would be assigned to sew 1,000 shirts. So many shirts. That's so many shirts.
I'm sorry, for a second I had a stroke and was speechless.
Yes.
That's a lot.
1,000 shirts a day with their team. Now, the psychology in this is insane. So first of all, you need to produce that many shirts so you don't get paid. And you're working as a team, so if you're the one that can't keep up,
oh my God,
everybody hates you and you get punished. Which is just this psychological mentality of this has nothing to do with your employer or the people paying him. This has everything to do with that one weakest link in your group. God. Right, it redirects the anger to that one person. And
so they don't get mad at the people who are behind the systemic problem.
Yes.
Jesus.
And, they're working for so long they can't even take bathroom breaks. So they're there all day sewing those shirts.
What the fuck?
Right? Cambodian garment workers live off of 150 calories a day on average.
No, you die then.
Because as Roth Minea states, she's a union worker there, she says feeding themselves is the one expense they can cut. Right?
But then you die though.
There would be days where you eat a little more, but on average they're starving themselves so that they can afford money because, as I said previously, right, you have these people that are leaving from farms and coming to city en masse. As a result of this environment, women are expected to go to these factories and then have money for themselves in horrible working conditions where there's like 6 people sleeping in a 1-bedroom apartment, and then also send money home.
Holy smoldering hell.
So there's only so much money. Like there as it is, like this one lady was being paid $49 a month.
Yeah.
So then you have to send some of that home because you need to support your family or they're gonna die, right? So
right, yeah.
You send the women and the girls to these cities and they work until they can't see or die and send the money home.
Oh my god.
So factory safety, and I'm going to follow up on the story that I opened this episode with, because this is an hour and 7 minutes in where finally why this all happens. So,
okay.
As it is, abuse is rampant in these factories.
Oh, sure, because it needed to get just a little worse.
You didn't think it was gonna get better. So the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, AFL-CIO, a little too long, but that's another episode where I yell about abbreviations. It found that about 90% of garment workers they'd interviewed had experienced physical beatings for not meeting quotas. Sexual assaults is rampant. Essentially, sleep with me or you lose your job. People are living in horrible living conditions. They're expected to go to factories that are literally falling apart. To quote the book We're All Fast Food Workers Now, 3 of the biggest disasters in history of the garment industry has happened since 2010. More will likely happen before you read this book. What a happy person. This book is a bummer, man.
Yeah, whoever wrote that took pleasure in writing that sentence.
Yeah, fuck off.
God.
I want to read an excerpt of what happened at this building fire that when I was reading it, I knew there was no way in hell I was not including it in the episode.
Do I get a vote?
What?
Do I get a vote? I don't want to be sad.
Oh no, bitch. This is the one. This is the sad passage.
All right. Let me buckle up really quick.
Yep.
Click.
Right.
There we go.
Click. All right, your seatbelt is on.
Securely fastened around my waist.
So, Actor is an activist in the area who tries to help workers, and she helps with the unionization and collective bargaining. And she talks about this scene during that building collapse.
Okay.
Where a grieving mother is recounting to her what happened, and she talks about how she's on the phone with her son while he is in this building fire, and she goes, "Son, try your best and find places where people are escaping." He goes, "Okay, Mom, but I can't find any place." She goes, "Find a window, break the window, and jump." "Mom, I can't find any way out. It's dark, there's smoke, there's fire in the building. Go to the bathroom, wet your shirt in the sink, bury your face in the wet cloth so you can breathe. I'm coming to you." The son made his way to the bathroom, but there was no water. The last call, the son said, "Mom, there's no way I can survive. I am opening my shirt and tying it around my waist. You can find my body seeing this." When the light broke the next morning, Actor said, the mom was crying in front of me. She found the body just the way her son had said. Actor's eyes filled with tears as she tells this story. So this is basically the pain, these tears. It's hard to live with these memories. And Actor went home briefly at 2:30 in the morning that night to surf the internet and try to figure out which company owned Tezreen. When the morning came, she returned to the factory with the knowledge that it was run by a company called the Tuba Group. They own many factory garments. Tezreen was just one. And that was a building fire. My mistake. That's not the building collapse. This is one of the building fires that happened. And that's just
one
heartbreaking
of them.
That's how the mom found it.
Jesus.
And upon investigation of this burned building, Actor found that the fabric was piled and blocking the exits. Open hazard. She found labels and documents that Walmart, Sears, Kick, and Disney Kids were producing fabrics there and clothing there.
Holy shit.
She gives this one statement, and I don't think I copied it, but I recall it vividly because it breaks my heart, where essentially she had to go through the rubble because in order to ever prove that these companies are here, the system of getting these garment factories to do business with you is you, as a company, hire somebody in charge of labor. That person hires subcontractors within a wide variety of countries, and then those subcontractors pay factories to make these clothing. So if something bad happens, they're able to have this shield of no responsibility and say, we didn't know about that, that's the contractor's fault, we're completely distant from this situation.
God, that's so evil.
So evil. That's objectively evil. Fuck you.
Yeah. What?
And actor goes through this building that's still, like, there's still cinders and smoke, and she's digging through the rubble, and she finds a bag of sew-on tags, and the tags say "Made with Love," and it's for the children's place. And just reading that just, like, shattered me. She cried because it's children's clothing, and just to say that is so unbelievably fucked up. And
yeah,
so,
oh my God.
And she said in a quote, even after we sent the labels, they told us we were not there. Then we sent the pictures of their products and documents showing that they were buyers. They said we weren't there. When we sent a picture of me and the labels together standing with ashes in my hand, they went, well, we were there, but it was a subcontractor. It's not our responsibility. Ooh, which makes me so unbelievably mad.
Yeah, if you listen very closely, you can hear the sound of my brain tearing in half.
It's just that SpongeBob picture where
Yes!
his brain just rips and falls. Yeah, it's horrible. And so the part that I wanted to end on, I kind of waffled if this is how I want to end it, but I think this is crucial because I think this is what fucked me up. Is I remember when I took this class, my teacher said something to the effect of, there have been people who have written articles saying, you know, in praise of cheap labor, you know, God bless cheap labor, we don't have enough sweatshops. And I was full of rage when I heard that.
Yeah.
And then I read them and got very sad because they're not writing these in a way of, these are objectively super good things and this is really, really great and this is something that we need support forever. It is this sobering tone of an economist that knows there's nothing else that we can do for them. So I picked an article called In Praise of Cheap Labor, and just so I can get the author correctly, because it was a very good article. It was written March 21st, 1997 by Paul Krugman, who's, I believe, won a Nobel Prize in economics, so I'm going to say he knows what he's talking about.
Perhaps, yeah.
His argument is that, yes, he said, objectively, sweatshops are horrible. This is horrible conditions. They're beaten. They are not paid enough money. I'm not in any way going to say that this is a great place for them to be, but it's better than the alternative. And so I'll say the caveat to that. I'm going to play devil's advocate as I kind of analyze his argument. There are many people in We Are All Fast Food Workers Now that said despite the better pay that they're objectively receiving, they didn't volunteer to leave their farms, but were in fact evicted, or they had to leave as a result of not being able to compete globally.
Sure.
There's other anthropologists that argue that there's inherent structural violence in poverty-stricken countries because there's an absence of choice. You don't get the luxury of picking a nice job.
Right.
You have to pick the shitty job. So yes, it's a better option, but it's not like they have a ton of
better
options.
Than what? Like
so I'll go into the examples because he gives examples. The one I will say is if they stay on the farm that can't compete globally and probably can't even produce enough food for them to eat, they're all going to starve. And then I will also talk about the other alternatives.
Good.
Additionally, it was found, so fuck Nike. I'm going to say objectively, the only one that I really fucking...
Nike.
This one in particular, I yelled. Nike had a brand, like, readjustment in 2008 where they called themselves a feminist organization because they were raising women out of poverty by letting them work in factories.
God.
Fuck you. Like, I don't fuck you. Because in 2016, it was found that Nike workers in Vietnam earned only about a quarter of what they would need bare minimum to survive. So fuck you.
Just fuck them so hard. Oh
Fuck
my
you.
god. This fake woke bullshit with the Colin Kaepernick ad and the, oh, we're feminists because we are giving women jobs. Fuck off. Okay, we can talk a lot about, like, the nuances of this bullshit and using sweatshops, etc., etc. But when you're a multi-billion-dollar company and you're aware that this is where you're getting your product, and then you choose to claim that you are socially conscious and ethical, you are evil. You have turned into a Disney villain, and you deserve to fall off a cliff to your bloody death.
Yeah, I say that's fair. I say that's actually conservative in how I feel.
Oh my god, it's insane.
I'm so angry.
Like, they could have just not had that ad campaign. They could have just not made those public statements, and they would have been just like every other garbage company out there. But my god, they had to take it just the extra mile, right? And claim that they're above everybody else.
Yeah, fuck you.
Fuck you, oh my god.
Oh my god, and so...
I'm heated.
That made me mad.
Yeah.
That made me mad. So, one quote, and I'm going to read this quote directly, because this stung a little bit. He said, which is not wrong, and that's why it hurt. He said, unlike starving subsistence farmers, the women and children in the sneaker factory are working at slave wages for our benefit, and this makes us feel unclean. Which, fuck, man. I mean, like, that's the only reason we care. Like, nobody did anything when they're starving in the countryside, or they're day laborers, like, indentured into being slaves forever. But the moment that, like, our goods make us feel bad...
It's on our body, so...
Yeah, we're like, oh, I don't want it to be like that. And you're like...
Which, like, I guess... Yes, but also, like, there is sort of a lack of awareness. Yeah. Like... Yeah, we're globally connected now by the internet, etc., but also, it's just not talked about. Like, people don't know this stuff. And so when it suddenly comes to light, oh, your sneakers were made by someone who made a quarter in a day. Yeah. Like, yeah, that feels shitty because you didn't know.
Yeah. And I can say if you don't know, I get it, right? Yeah. I feel like we all subconsciously know it's bad. I think knowing how bad it is shocking.
Yes.
But
the
it's
name
still,
of this show.
Every time still not we find wrong, out, like, of that things only occur because if it affects us, then it matters. You know?
Yeah, it's easier to turn a blind eye to it when it's not currently existing on your person. You know?
Yeah. And so then his economic argument, which I read so much on, and I would like to disagree with him, but I can't.
Oh no.
He's essentially saying forcing labor standards to meet ours would do nothing for day laborers and peasants. So you have somewhere like Bangladesh, right, which like 90% are garment factory workers. But there's so many other poor people there, like it's not fixing the issue of poverty. And he's like, that's the root of this whole thing, is there's clear poverty and they have the absence of choice and they're doing whatever they can to make money. Forcing them to do this does not help everyone in the country, which I understand that argument. Biggest thing, and the reason why I went so deep on the economics, is because it would impede the country's abilities to participate in global competitive growth. If you have somewhere like Bangladesh, if you raise labor standards and the companies leave, 90% of your economy is in the shitter, and you have nothing else. So what do you expect the poor countries to do? That you can't just I'm gonna make it as good as the US and make sure everybody gets $11.25 an hour. It's not
possible.
It's not feasible. There was a National Bureau of Economic Research that found that consumers were willing to pay 15% more on a $100 item and 28% more on a $10 item if it was made under good working conditions, which I'm going to elaborate on later, but I disagree with that, and we'll talk about that later. But that still goes into the fact of paying more money for something because it's under good working conditions does not necessarily make the good impact that we want. And the quote he has that also really resonated with me was, "A policy of good jobs in principle but no jobs in practice might assuage our consciences, but it is no favor to its alleged beneficiaries."
Right, then
which
they just don't have a job and then they die.
Right? And it's the same thing that happened in the U.S. of these people, rightly so, were petitioning for higher pay in the 70s when things were really bad. And so some of them got that, and then a lot of them became unemployed in a system where there's absolutely no social assistance. There's no social assistance in Bangladesh. Like, you're telling me you can register for unemployment? No.
Hell no. Yeah.
So, like, that's a tough thing, because if you force them all to improve their living, like, working standards,
yeah, then
there's going to be so many people that are going to be unemployed, they're just going to inevitably starve.
Right.
You know?
Jesus.
And so the part that I guess I wanted to leave on, I guess is kind of positive in a way, is it might feel bad to hear it, but economically things have improved. Things are bad, but things have improved. So since 1970, the per capita intake is like about 2,100 calories a day in some of these countries. And now the per capita intake is about 2,800 calories a day of the person. And about 1/3 of the children are still malnourished in some of these countries, which is bad. But in 1975, it was more than half.
Right.
So, like, that's kind of what we're looking at here, is things aren't great. And the author never argues that this is great. These are great working conditions, but things are better. And
right.
I think
it took decades to get here. It's going to take decades to get out.
So I read another article, 2 Cheers for Sweatshops, where Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wooden made a very good point, and I think it best articulates their whole article. When Britain launched the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century, it took 58 years for per capita output to double. In China, per capita output has been doubling every 10 years.
Okay.
So it's, it's that comparison of, like, in the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution was horrible in Britain and the U.S.
Oh, yeah,
but as
terrible.
a result, now we've evolved and we have industry, and I'm going to say probably things are better than the late 18th century. So they're saying...
I mean, I didn't have to go to work in a factory and then contract the black lung, so yeah.
So I think in the grand scheme of things, we're doing all right. And so that's essentially their argument here is, like, yeah, it's bad, but if you look at the progress, gross domestic product of Asia alone is rising 55 to 60%, like, projected to 2025. That's incredible. Things are bad, but, their GDP is increasing. They're able to improve their infrastructure. Homes exist. There's certain areas that do have support for the poor and the unemployed and the homeless. Things are getting better, but just not in the way that I think we, as privileged people, would like.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it is sort of a strange thing for, like, students especially, or people who are just about to join the workforce. Like, we exit college and then we we have to find a job, and we have the entire job market of the United States at our fingertips, which, by the way, isn't good, and I'm not saying it is, but like, there are industries, countless industries that we can apply to and build skills for. Whereas in these other countries, it's one. You get one.
Yeah. There were definitely interviews that I read where they said, my daughter is currently at a sweatshop a little north of here, and she's working 9 hours a day. I hope she can get more hours because it's really good money. Like, they want to work these hours because the alternative is rice and beetles, right? To them, this is incredible. Like, they will never not acknowledge the working conditions are bad. Yes, there is violence. It's bad.
So I think that's the thing that, like, I can't, like, rectify in my brain.
Yeah.
Is, like, the sweatshops exist and they kind of have to right now. But, like, nowhere in any of this is there a social contract that says that they have to be abused. Like,
No.
that's just for funsies, and I just...
That's fucked.
Yeah, like, none of that is necessary.
No.
Like, yes, we need to meet quotas, whatever, but, like, if you don't meet your 1,000-shirt quota, I'm gonna rape you is not... That's not policy, that's just someone who isn't satisfied with their life who wants to take out the little power they have. And, like,
and that's
ain't no way
super
I'm gonna
fucked.
be excusing that, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not nuanced.
Yeah, and that's part and parcel of the unwillingness of these countries to increase regulation on treatment of their workers, because again, if they do that, then they leave. You know, and like that's what's so fucked about this. And I have a long passage from that article that is probably all of my thoughts, and we can talk about this passage because I think it best articulates the spot that not only we're in, but economists are in, and, you know, political leaders are kind of between a rock and a hard place, whether you're in the country that's trying to figure out a way to increase their GDP in any way possible, or whether you're somebody that's just trying to make enough food to send home to your family. It's a bad spot, and this, I feel like, is a really good representation of the problem, and then we can have a discussion on how you feel about this, because this is so much, and I feel like I've had like a I'm in a K-hole right now just screaming.
Oh, God.
But let's close it up with this passage.
Let's do it.
You may say that the wretched of the earth should not be forced to serve as hewers of wood and drawers of water and sewers of sneakers for the affluent. But what's the alternative? Should they be helped with foreign aid? Maybe, although the historical records of regions like southern Italy suggests that such aid has a tendency to promote perpetual dependence. Anyway, there isn't the slightest prospect of significant aid materializing. Should their own government provide more social justice? Of course, but they won't. Or at least not because we tell them to, and as long as you have no realistic alternative to industrialization based on low wages, to oppose it means that you are willing to deny desperately poor people the best chance they have of progress for the sake of what amounts to an aesthetic standard. That is, the fact that you don't like the idea of workers being paid a pittance to supply the rich Westerners with fashion items.
Okay.
So, what that distills to is, should they be helped? Yes. Should they receive foreign aid? Yes. He's realistic in the fact that the U.S. government's not going to fucking provide foreign aid. The government's not going to provide social justice for people that they just need to work to improve their GDP. And I think it's reasonable to say, you know, if you stop buying these items, these factories are going to close down, and then they're not going to have the money. But then also, and my biggest qualm with this is I read a couple of articles where people were on their high and mighty horse with their doctorate degrees making six figures a year. Dr. Jason Higgle, sorry, fuck you.
Yikes, that name, though.
I think it's Higgle. Might be.
Okay.
I don't care. The question is not whether we have the ability to do this, but whether we have the courage. Now, Higgle, let's fucking unpack your statement. Here's my problem. Let's say, theoretically, the solution is that we need to pay more money for our clothes to provide sustainable, like, jobs for these people where they're getting paid enough.
Okay.
I have looked into those companies. There are companies that exist, and if you have the money to pay $75 for a pair of jeans, I fully endorse that you can do that. And they break down the cost and show you why it costs the amount of money that it does.
Right.
And I respect that, but I cannot do that as a college student. You know, my jeans break and I'm like, well, I either go to Goodwill and get something that maybe fits me if I'm lucky, or I swing by on the moment I have an opportunity to buy a pair of shitty jeans from Target that lasts me a little longer. And, like, there's other arguments I heard when I was in this class. People were like, yeah, but if you buy the $75 pair of jeans, they're going to last for a really long time. And I'm like, that all depends on somebody's ability to have $75 of expendable income in that moment.
Which most people don't.
Right. And I also went into this circular loop of poverty where I think, and this is what I wrote in my final essay for this class, I think the root of the issue here is we've all been trapped into a circle of contributing to the same system that impoverishes us. So if you look at the US, we, like, everyone I know has debt from going to college. Mm-hmm. Everyone I know struggles to get a job. My friends are going to get older. We're going to buy homes and have mortgages and then have more debt to pay for important things that we need to have to, like, drive to work. The debt in the US is a whole other episode that we can unpack. Ugh. And as a result, we all live on a budget. Very few people in the US can afford to buy a $75 pair of jeans or a $50 white t-shirt. Sorry about it. A lot of people have kids. If you have kids and you're working a minimum wage job, they're getting the cheapest shirt you can buy from Target. Mm-hmm. Right? Oh,
yeah. Yeah,
and
definitely.
So, but as a result of buying these cheap things, we're not creating jobs in the U.S. for people to work in garment factories where they could get paid more. It has to stay in the global South. Mm-hmm. And then by buying those commodities, yes, we're giving people jobs to work in sweatshops, but then they have to work in sweatshops that pay poorly, because if we paid more money for sweatshops that had to pay more, those sweatshops would just hire less people, which causes people to starve. And at the end of the day, the losers are always going to be the global South. Even if we all decide to buy less things, the burden doesn't fall on us. The burden falls on the people that are going to starve to death. Right?
There is literally no winning if you are already poor.
So, like, that's why I'm stuck, because I can't do anything. I'm fucked either way. And I think what's so unfortunate is I have read so many economic, like, analyses of the situation, and the reason why economists are so cold to this is because they've also read the historical data. They've seen how people behave in markets, and they're like, nobody's going to fucking help these people. You are all unwilling to pay more money for something that will last longer. We have been marketed to, like, buy things on the regular. People go spring shopping. You get a new wardrobe for every season. That's not going to stop, because we've been hypnotized into this feeling of if you purchase things, you feel good. I'm not blaming anyone for that, because I do that. If I'm having, like, a really bad day, I'm like, I got this cute shirt and I feel nice. Fully aware that it was not made somewhere where they're getting paid well.
Right.
Like, yeah. The economists are like, what are you going to fucking do? Because I've seen the way that you behave. I've analyzed the data, and none of you care. None of you are going to do anything. The governments aren't going to care. The only reason the governments care at all about these sweatshops is because, like, people were willing to go in there and, like, put their life on the line to report on how bad it is. And even then, how many people do you know? Like, we know how bad sweatshops are. And we're like, yeah, but I really want a pair of Lululemon pants. Like, you know what I mean? It's just...
Well, it's not even that. I mean, it's... I mean, and I guess there is that element of it where it's like, yeah, but I love this brand. And, like...
Yeah.
There absolutely is that element of it. But then, you know, on the other hand, we have already established that if we decided I'm boycotting Lululemon because they use sweatshops, then an entire cross-section of people are now jobless and destitute and probably are gonna die. So, like, at this point, at least for you and I, it becomes a question of, I'm aware of this now. What am I going to do about it that will cause the least harm? And there isn't a good answer. There just isn't one. Like, I don't know how to resolve this episode now, because it's like, what do you do? And the answer is shrug, I guess. Like, I think the thing that gets me, and will continue to get me, about this whole thing, is what you said about, you know, the human rights policies that people try to, or rather governments try to enact within these companies. So, like, let's say a government tries to regulate the sexual assault or regulate the way that the workers are treated, the abuse within factories.
Yeah.
And you said that would be fine, and then the companies would just pick up and move to the next place that would allow them to continue doing business that way. Which, to me, is just fucking insane. That, like... let me just break this down really quick, make sure I get it. You are telling me that a company, let's say, I don't know, Amazon, is willing to establish, not a corporation, a factory in another country, create this whole working environment where management, if you can hear the air quotes, is allowed to do whatever the fuck they want to their workers, up to and including beating them and sexually assaulting them. If the country tries to step in and say, hey, maybe don't treat your workers like shit, not even talking about pay, we're just talking about behavior.
Yeah.
That the company is then willing to pick up, spend the money to pick up from that country, find another place to do business just to maintain the ability to be abusive.
Yep.
Why?
Costs more money.
To not be abusive?
Like, I mean, like, that's the thing, too, is their like, profit standpoint, they're just like, well, we'd have to pay more money if there's protections on workers, and we have to pay them more. So, that's a lot of work, and people don't like paying money for things generally, so...
Okay, but it costs millions of dollars to relocate your entire operation to another country.
Yep.
I feel like someone's just not crunching the numbers?
I also feel a little upset that there are CEOs of companies that literally get multi-million-dollar paychecks a year and they can't just pay...
Oh, don't worry though, Olivia, don't worry. Jeff Bezos donated $10 billion to charity, so it's fine. That's his fucking pocket change. Jeff Bezos shits $10 billion out of his ass every morning.
Yeah, and that's, you know, it's so interesting. Like I said, like maybe a few days ago, I said, are we gonna like sweatshops? And you went, no. And I was like, I don't know, we might. And you're like, no.
Like, I don't, but I get, like, I understand now the nuance of the situation. I don't like it any more than I did when I started this little journey of ours, but, like, it's complicated. I get it. I get that it's complicated. It's still shitty as hell. So, sue me, I guess.
And that's what's so, you know, we'll do our what we've learned, because we've both screamed into our mic.
That's fair.
Many times. I am surprised with where I went with this episode, because I was anticipating doing so much more information on the cruelty in these sweatshops. And I think what keeps me up at night is not the degree of like brutality that exists in these countries with these workers, whether it's literally relocating a multi-million-dollar like factory to somewhere else, or the fact that countries are incentivized to create small areas of tax and like human rights free zones so that people will want to do business there. It's just all of it, like the history of it proves to me that there is this fundamental incompatibility with capitalism and full equality, because at the end of the day, life got better for us since the 70s, and actually better for the people overseas, but it still fucking sucks. And in order to sustain this system in which we have created, to a degree, we need to be comfortable with the fact that people are going to live worse than us. And that's really hard for me to stomach.
Yeah.
And that was so difficult for me to parse in those economic readings. But at the end of the day, I think what's causing this strain on our side is you have workers that say, yes, I want rights. Yes, I want to get paid more. Yes, this is awful and we should organize, and I fully support and agree them. But you have people who have the luxury of getting weekends off and paid sick days and the expectation that employers are going to treat us well and not hit us, or we'll just tell HR. And then we compare our luxury, our reality, with people who are like, this gets me food, so at the end of the day, I'm less worse, right? And we come in with this complex of like, well, I can fix it by buying like organic cotton tees, and I've done this, and I'm gonna help, and it doesn't fix the poverty. Like
it doesn't fix shit.
Right? And that's what the economists are arguing, is like, you can buy less things from sweatshops. That's not the problem. The problem is so deeply rooted in our global economy.
It's inherent to capitalism.
And am I Karl Marx?
I mean, and that is sort of the thing. And we could do an entire other thing on like socialism and capitalism and whatever, because like capitalism doesn't work. Period. It just doesn't. Like there is no system under there is no ethical consumption under capitalism.
Yeah.
Yeah, call me a commie, whatever, man. But like,
tweet at you.
Don't at me. But like, it's the truth. Like, there's no way that you could go out right now and buy something and not be standing on somebody else, right? Like, you just can't do it.
Yeah.
But like, and it's so funny because the internet has taken that truth and warped it to, we need to reinstate communism, and that's not the answer either. So
yeah, I mean, like, that's what's so complex, is you can say like, and I fully agree, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Like, you could buy like ethically sourced chocolate that sustains the rainforest, and a certain portion of their profit like goes back to replanting trees. There's still paper wrapping it. There's still the shipping fees. There's still the energy that went into shipping it, and the oil, which is another episode.
It's all bad.
But like, the solution is also not to eliminate capitalism, because if we did, these people would starve. Like,
right,
that's,
so
I
like,
don't know what to do.
So this is the thing, is that like, there is sort of an echo chamber on the internet especially, but like, with people who don't know what they're talking about, which I will raise my hand and say I am one of them, but I am witnessing this sort of echo chamber of like, well, we just need to revolutionize the United States and just dissolve our government. We are not alone in this anymore. Like, we are far past the days when the U.S. was just the U.S. If, like we said earlier, if the U.S. goes down, we take 100 countries with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
so, yeah, that would happen, and then all these people would die. That's on your conscience, I guess. Yeah. Like, what the hell do we do?
I never know how to feel about econ, because I think what's so even the Volcker shock, he said this is going to be horrible.
Yeah.
There's going to be unemployment. People are going to be miserable. But as a result, things are going to be okay again. And you have to be comfortable with the fact that an economy lives and breathes and has to have lows and highs. And I think we're currently so unwilling to sacrifice any of our comfort that this is the way that it is until somebody far smarter than me has a solution to this. Because I don't know what to do. And that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I think the thing that keeps me up at night is that it's all fake. We just designed all of this, and it's all just fake. But and I say that, it is fake, but like, it isn't anymore. Someone designed these systems, and now they are so rooted in everything that we know, our entire culture, our whole way of living, that it became an entity unto itself. And there's no effective way to get rid of it without murdering a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You,
on that note, if you...
back with a banger.
Thank you so much for waiting for us. I think this was a good refresher. I really enjoyed writing this episode. I hope it didn't sound too manic.
Also, I was right. We're almost at 2 hours.
Hey! Really coming back with a lot of content for y'all. I'm not an economist, so forgive me if I distilled things. I understand that I distilled things greatly. We hit 2 hours, my guys. Can you give me a little bit of a break?
We're back to our old ways.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll come back to this. There's so many other episodes potentially embedded in this episode.
Oh yeah.
We have a Twitter and Instagram at TTKMeUp. We have a website, ttkmeup.com.
Hell
We
yeah.
love hearing from you. I'm honestly so interested to hear people's response to this episode.
Yeah, it'll be
because-
interesting to hear because there are just a lot of complicated takes.
Yeah, and I would love, if I missed something, if I misinterpreted something, I would love to hear that as well. We can kind of touch on it in our next Heavy Hitters, how I'll do it, because it'll be like a cohesive series.
Right.
We love our patrons. If you want to join us on Patreon and give us a little bit of money, that would be
Yes,
dope.
please. Now we're making $25 a month, so that's enough to retire, I think.
Yeah, I think we can live like kings. And
Perfect.
I don't know if I have much to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you
I
so
really
much.
appreciate it. It was really good to get out of my system because this affects me every single day with every purchase that I make. Fully aware that every purchase I make is you're voting with your money, and I just don't know even if good votes can have bad effects. And I want to hear from y'all, and I want to see how you feel, because this was definitely a very interesting and challenging experience for me and out of my comfort zone, and I had a really good time. Well,
You
good
hurt
times,
my
Janice.
brain. You hurt
I-
my brain.
I had a time.
All right, well, see ya, everybody.
It's been real, and we love you.
See ya.
Bye!
Oh boy.
Deuces.